walking to school down 5th Street has left me with many memories. You could have probably slid down. Well, I remember, so I came to campus for my interview, gosh, it'd be 4 years ago now, in early 2018. So February of 2018, it was the week after Winter Carnival. And I'm still chuckling about this to this day, but the head of the search committee, he called me, or I think he called, but I kind of remember him saying it on the voice. He was like, Janet, he goes, make sure you wear boots. And I was like, you think I'm gonna show up in high heels or something? You know.
I've seen students rock the flip-flops straight through winter. You never know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember somebody telling me when I came for my campus interview that if I liked to shop, that this might not be the place for me, right? Like if that was my form of recreation, if retail therapy was my recreational activity, that this might not be the best fit. But again, for me, it's perfect because that does not sound like a compelling form of recreation. But I thought it was interesting that they felt the need to explain that just in case that was what I chose to do for recreation, this might not be the best place to be.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to make sure I can share screen without losing my screen. Sometimes I do. So you can see the waterway, right? Is that what you can see? All right, and I'm going to bring down my slides. I have a big monitor that helps me see everything. And I'm going to put it on the first slide and present. All right. So my on-time early start begins at 5:55 p.m. So that I have enough time to kind of give 5 minutes of introductions and remarks for on-time start of 6 p.m. So welcome everybody to Husky Bites. I'm really looking forward to this evening talk. I want to thank Mike and Karen Gregory, who sponsored this evening's presentation, and more on that in just a moment. So Husky Bites are a free interactive webinar where we hang out with people from all over the world and learn something new kind of while we're eating supper. So I have a lively slide here. This is a montage of photos from Thursday night last week, where we had an alumni gathering in Indianapolis. And so you can see, I'm going to start from the upper left, a nice family who showed up with our youngest future Huskies. Top right, that was a big long table. We were in a tavern. I think it was called the Indiana Brewery. And then to the far right, upper far right, what we have are the two different fencins, or what do you call them, presidents of the fencing club. Arith is the one facing us, and Terry is the one where we're seeing, and I'm having them fence with each other with an imaginary sword. But I thought it was just such an incredible coincidence that we would have two fencing presidents there at the same time. And Terry is an EE, I think class of 83 or so. Moving around, you can see me with Jim Schluckbeyer, who is one of our alumni who received one of our early Husky Bites t-shirts. And it was nice to see him. He was one of the first alumni to greet me at the first alumni gathering I ever experienced, which was, I guess, August of 2018. And then moving a little bit further, you can see a lot of our Society of Women Engineering students, or what we call SWE students, who were in Indianapolis for the SWE conference. And so I wanted to kind of show everybody this because every now and then there's an alumni gathering in your area. And if you ever kind of wanted to know what that looks like, this is kind of what it looks like. It's hanging out and talking and just hanging out with fellow Huskies. And so, and if anybody wants to kind of lead something like that, I do want to kind of make sure that you know that a new vice president of alumni engagement is being has, I believe, been selected, and there should be some announcements in tech today about that. So if you ever wanted to get involved with an alumni chapter in your area, there'll be somebody for you to reach out to soon. And whenever I go into a city, I try to organize an alumni gathering. So this is kind of why we gathered that night. All right, next slide. So tonight we'll be hearing from Alan Turnquist, as well as Larry Hermanson and Chelsea Schelly, and Alan will introduce them in a moment. We have 4 left. Following that, we will be wrapping it up on the Monday of Thanksgiving week and leaving December free for you guys to go to holiday parties or whatever it is you might want to do. So tonight's session, I just want to again thank Mike and Karen Gregory, who have established the Frank Chernowski Campus Climate Scholarship and Ambassador Awards. So this is named after a beloved Frank Chernowski, a former advisor at Michigan Tech, who was an early advocate here for sustainability principles and who impacted many students before dying tragically from a heart cancer in 1971. So this award in his name, there's three ways of supporting students. There's a partial tuition scholarship, there's funds for professional development or applied work, and there's a formal mentorship by campus or external professionals. And so the Gregorys are going to be matching dollar for dollar if anybody wants to make a gift. And so if you do, give to this link, and I will be putting this in the chat so that you can see it. And so I'll do that after we get started. But I just want you to know, I just want to really acknowledge the Gregorys. Thank you so much. Next week is going to be rather interesting. I hope I don't make everybody dizzy by moving around too fast. What we hope to do is be in the sustainability demonstration house with like a GoPro camera on somebody's head and showing you the house and kind of hearing from the students as well as from one of the professors in sociology, Rochelle Winkler. So I'm really looking forward to that. It could be, well, it may make you dizzy, but we'll see how that goes. All right, and then with this, I wanted to remind everybody to ask a question. Use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and you just type in your question. And if we have enough time, we'll get to all the questions. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to introduce our speakers, or at least one of the speakers tonight, Alan. Are you now no longer seeing my screen? Okay. So Alan, if you have slides you want to share, you can go ahead and start with that now. But it is my pleasure this evening to introduce Alan Turnquist, who is our recently appointed Director of Sustainability and Resilience at Michigan Tech, which was in September of 2021. So this is now your end of 1 month on the job, and you're already, look at you, you're being forced to speak in public about something you're passionate about. So before stepping into this role, he designed, led, and implemented orientation programs for incoming students. And so I was very glad that you did that, and I'm sure you've passed that off to able hands. Alan comes to us from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He has a JD in environmental and administrative law. He is a Master of Science in agriculture and applied economics, and a BA in Latin American and Caribbean studies. And so this is a man of varied interests. He loves riding bicycles, and in fact is famous for having ridden with his partner on a tandem bike, right, from the Canadian Arctic in the Northwest Territory all the way down to the southernmost tip of Argentina, Ushuaia, Argentina, which took them 18 months, 17,000 miles, and 10 years of marital therapy following riding on. No, I'm kidding. My husband calls he won't ever get on a tandem bicycle. He goes, that's the fastest path to a divorce. I know he's joking about that. But anyway, with this, I give you Alan Turnquist, who will lead us off and who will also be introducing the other speakers. Alan.
Well, thanks, Janet. I appreciate that. The best tandem quote that I've ever heard is that it accelerates whatever direction your relationship is going in the first place. So luckily, it sent us in a good direction, and we're here in Houghton and happy to be here. So I do want to share some slides with you all and a couple of polls, and just to set up a bit of context and background information. It should take maybe 10 or 12 minutes or so, and then I want to have a little back and forth with the co-hosts here, Chelsea and Larry. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Chelsea and Larry right now, since we're all here and I'm not sharing. So Chelsea Schelly is an associate professor of sociology here at Michigan Tech. She's in the social sciences department. And she's also the lead of the Tech Forward initiative on sustainability and resilience. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means later today. So welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you.
And Larry Hermanson, the second co-host here, I guess third, is the Director of Energy Management here at Michigan Tech. So he runs manages all of the energy use here on campus. And he's also the co-interim director of facilities administration and planning. So hi, Larry.
Hi there.
And what brings us together actually is sustainability and resilience. So we have all been active in the initiative on sustainability and resilience over the past couple of years. And I thought it would be appropriate to kind of bring us all together, because one of the things that you're going to see about sustainability and resilience in an institution like this is that it requires us to cut across boundaries where we don't normally work and to work together. So I'm really excited to have Larry and Chelsea here. They bring very different perspectives, and I really appreciate how we can work together on all aspects of this. So I'm going to go ahead and try and share my screen. How am I looking? Good. All right. Very good. Okay, so I entitled this Where We Are and Where We Might Go. So I want to talk a little bit about some definitions of sustainability, talk for a few minutes about where Michigan Tech is at and what we're doing well, and maybe what some of the challenges are in front of us, and then start the conversation about where we go from here. So to start with some definitions, there's no perfect definition of sustainability or resilience, but here's a couple of good ones to get us started and on the same page here. So sustainability typically has a couple of different facets to it. One is meeting the needs of now, and one is looking towards the future and not compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is probably the single most famous definition. It's been around for 35 years. And you don't see environment in here, but it's certainly implied. And you also see some sort of equity issues in here. So let's take care of everybody now, and let's think about the future as well. So resilience, I like to think of this as a flip side of the same coin as sustainability. And it's looking forward, anticipating what sort of changes and challenges there might be coming down the line, and being ready to maintain and do what's important to you through those changes. Lots of times we lump these two concepts together under sustainability. They both have a kind of a breadth aspect, a contextual aspect, and a sort of thoughtful planning aspect to them. So we'll probably roll some of these together under the umbrella of sustainability in the future. So one way to think about these in an applied setting is in climate change. You hear a lot about climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation as sort of the two necessities of the day. And these fit pretty well with the sustainability and resilience split too. So the sustainability side of that is the mitigation side, right? This is, we all have a footprint, and we need to think about reducing our contribution to climate change. And then the resilience side of things is the adaptation, realizing that we're well along the path to climate change, and we need to anticipate and plan for the challenges and the curveballs that that's going to throw us, so that we can continue to do what's important to us. All right. So, of course, why does this matter to Michigan Tech? I think one of the most fascinating things about being a sustainability and resilience officer at higher education is that it impacts us in so many ways. We have a physical footprint, right? We have a big campus. We use a lot of energy. We have a lot of buildings. We manage forests. We manage other green space. And so we have employees who commute every day because of working here. We have employees who fly for work. So just overall, our resource use that's attendant to the university is quite high. And just like any other business, sustainability and resilience demands that we consider the impacts of those and try to reduce them. And so that's just one side of the story. Everybody, I think, understands that Michigan Tech and most other higher education institutions have a mission that can have some ripple effects, whether that's through research that can change the way that we approach problems in the future and solve problems, and certainly in creating leaders of tomorrow through our education programs. And so sustainability in that realm can have ripple effects, right? And there's a multiplier to what we do here to setting that up for the future. And that really brings it to the forefront again. So this movement is well underway in higher education across the board for corporations in different sectors. As a consumer, you certainly can't get away from the idea of sustainability through labels, whatever. In higher education, though, there's a really strong and growing group of professionals here that are focused on this. It's the norm for higher education institutions to have somebody like me who is a sustainability and resilience professional, and it's their job to bring some of these things together. There's also really great professional societies and ranking systems so that you can go through and assess what you're doing and advertise that about, part of who you are and what commitments you have. And so that's all really well established in higher education. And this is an important point. Students care. Prospective students care. The Princeton Review every year does a survey of prospective college students. It's called the Hopes and Worries Survey. And this last year, 75% of the students that filled that survey out said that an institution's commitment to the environment would have an impact on where they attend school. And that's a huge number, and it's been growing very quickly. And so we need to pay attention to that. And no surprise, right? Our students and our alumni are out in front and pushing us to be better. I mean, before I had this position, I do advise the Students for Sustainability organization here and had some nice interactions with other student organizations, and they are pushing us and saying it's time to make commitments, it's time for action. And when I got hired for this position and it was announced, I heard from multiple alumni that just said, I'm so glad to see this is happening and let us know how we can help. And so they're there and we can feel it. And so I'm going to say something that maybe is a little bit provocative, but I certainly hold, and that's that advancing these themes of sustainability and resilience here at Michigan Tech, it's really a question of our relevance, all right? Whether that's through research, whether that's through attracting prospective students across the board.
Well, and also attracting people who want to work here. We were talking about that before we started. Part of why I'm here is that I wanted an improved quality of life. Each move I've made has moved me further and further away from a big city.
Well, that's a really great point. And that could have been another bullet on there, is that for Michigan Tech in particular, we're so connected to this place and the surroundings, and so many students, faculty, staff choose to come here because of how connected and the natural resources. And so, that's a great corollary that I should have put on there to start with. So I want to have some polls here. And as I understand, folks that are on the Facebook live feed cannot see the exact polls. So I will pull up a slide of what the polls are. We have 3 in a row here. And so Sue, if you can share the poll with folks who are on, or do I do that? Oh, there we go. So how many classes at Michigan Tech have sustainability or resilience in their core descriptions?
I'm going to guess B.
B.
6. B is 60. A is 25.
Well, you're with majority. So, all right. Numbers are still trickling in, but I think it's enough for me to end this poll. The answer is actually 140. And that comes from our STARS report last year. And again, this is the one of those big comprehensive rating systems that schools can apply to, and you submit your data and they give you a score back on how well you're doing. And Michigan Tech is doing very well in research and in curriculum. And so every department, every major has courses that have sustainability and resilience as a key part of the learning objectives in those classes. It's also a learning objective that we have across campus. And so we're doing pretty well. I wanted to highlight that as something that is a success for us. So the results, most people were with Janet at 60. So we're doing better than you thought. All right. Next poll here, changing things up a little bit towards the operation side. What do you think Michigan Tech's annual utilities budget is? Larry, you can't answer.
Well, and so I'm going to guess here we're talking about
This is
natural gas, electricity.
Yeah, and then oil for heating and garbage are the 2 other sort of big ones.
Okay.
So natural gas, electricity, water,
Water.
those 3 utilities combined.
Well, I don't think it's B this time. So the choices are 1 million, 2.5 million, 5.5 million, or 10 million.
All right. Well, we have a really good participation, so I'm going to share these results, and you all win a prize. C is the correct answer. You shouldn't all win a prize, but let's do majority rules here. And yeah, so we're at about 5.5 million. That obviously varies by the year. Weather has a lot to do with it, right? About 50% of that is on electricity. Larry, please correct me if these are wrong. These are sort of back of the envelope calculations. About 35% on natural gas for our campus heating plant. And then water and garbage and oil for heating are other significant categories, but 85% is in that electricity and heating category. So.
Excellent.
All right, I got one more that I want to add here that takes us one step further. So I'm asking what you think the order from biggest, the top three in order of our source of CO2 emissions.
Well, this is good. This is good. This is making me think. Gosh. They all include transportation, which makes me think commuting or air travel has to be one of the factors.
All right, I'm going to give you all about 10 seconds. People are less quick to answer this question. They're really
This
probably
is well, and the choices are on-site heat, electricity, air travel, commuting, electricity, on-site heat, food, commuting, on-site heat, or electricity, air travel, commuting.
Yep, I tried to make them realistic. And I'm going to end the poll because we're at 80% participation here just about, and I'll share the results. And it's fascinating. It's pretty even split across the board. Larry, do you know the answer?
I hope I do. Is it A?
Yes, it is A.
Right?
A is gas, electricity, and air travel. So
Yeah.
I had a feeling air travel was going to be in, but I was too afraid to commit.
Yep.
Yeah.
We travel millions of miles by air, being remote, and the heavy research. We're on the road a lot, in the air a lot. So air travel is a biggie. The reason why electricity is lower than natural gas is we purchase 50% of our electricity it's renewable wind energy. So that bumped electricity below the heat in the plant.
Yeah, you stole my punchline, Larry, but that's great. That's what you're here for. Right, so on-site heat is about 40%. Electricity is 27%, and directly controlled air travel is about 11%. Commuting is at 5%, and we just don't have a good handle on food. And that's something that we're going to try to do. That's a little trickier breakdown of what we get and where we get it from and that sort of thing. But the big hitters there are the heat and electricity. And I guess the one other thing I wanted to mention besides Larry's point on us purchasing renewable energy credits is that students have been at this, doing this carbon footprint for years. And so we have some historical data, and they're continuing to do it now. And so that's great. It's a good point for student engagement in these operations budgets. All right, so I'm going to move on to just a couple more slides here before we have a conversation. I've touched base on some of this already, but what are we doing well here? We have a really great array of sustainability and resilience coursework. I think we can do a little better at putting them together in a way so that all students, regardless of their path, can see how they can complement their work with it. But we have a lot of choices for coursework for students that want to engage that way. We have great innovative programs here at Michigan Tech. I think a lot of you understand this as a strength. So whether that's our enterprise programs that can work directly with industry or work on campus that are solutions oriented. We have next week, the Sustainability Demonstration House is going to be in Husky Bites. It's another example of innovation in this arena. And so we have a wide swath of this, and we're doing quite well. And great research across the board, whether it's on the technical side, the engineering side, looking for materials or process solutions, or on the social science side, looking for, how do we move some of these things forward, or messaging things through humanities. Obviously, the forestry department does a lot of great work. So really across the college, excuse me. So really everybody is doing a pretty good job here, and that's great. And I think this is really important. President Kobach and the administration and the board really prioritizes sustainability and resilience. That's the Tech Forward initiative. It's one of President Kobach's 9 priority areas. And my position is an important one. There's a lot of great stuff going around individually, kind of organically on campus, and just to bring things together a little more, it's really important. So I have those there. And that STARS rating system, which is really the game in town, we got a silver for our first submission, and that's pretty impressive. Really buoyed by our coursework and innovative programs and research. So we still have some work to do, but we're doing a lot of things pretty well, and that's good. So big challenges ahead. This is a big one. Climate is just such a huge issue right now, and state of Michigan is committed to carbon neutrality by 2050, reducing by, I think, 28% by 2025. And we're going to have to take those signals and run with them, going stepwise with what we anticipate is growing enrollment, in different and growing programs here. So coupling those two things together is going to be a challenge, but we're going to have to figure it out. Okay. Coordination and planning. I said there's a lot of great stuff going on here. We don't have an established strategic plan for sustainability and resilience. So that's a great way to get everybody's buy-in, get campus priorities set at a high level so that individual units can align their work with that. And so that's going to be a big push for me in this first year, is facilitating those conversations and coming out with some recommendations for the administration on that front. Got to continue to innovate always with research and education. Jana, I'm sure you and Chelsea can speak to this, but federal grants are changing. There's lots of opportunities for convergence, research and interdisciplinary work around some of these important themes. And so how do we position ourselves to take advantage of that and help our students through the programs that we develop? And we got a lot of strengths here. We have great connection to alumni and industry. We have innovative programs where students can do applied work. Let's just make those better through these challenges rather than making this be something that's at odds with each other, right? Putting resources towards sustainability investments could also be education and research investments that are strategically aligned. So let's keep that coupled up. And we're here for the students at the end of the day, right? So let's integrate them to help us find solutions. Let's use the big brains and the energy and the excitement to help us, right? And then in turn to help them develop the skills to be leaders of tomorrow. And I think that's just a really important coupling in our path forward that we need to keep in mind. So I want to have a conversation now with Chelsea and Larry. We're still going to have plenty of time for questions from you. So as you have them, you can keep putting them in the Q&A. I'm going to put this up here for just a moment, and then I'm going to stop my screen share so that you can get kind of a more full view of us. We do have a young but growing sustainability website, and there's a blog there and an email as well. So anytime you have any questions or you want to keep up on what we're doing, this is a great place to do that. So I'm going to stop my share. And I'm going to ask Larry a question first. So Larry, you have a really interesting background. You've worked in the mining industry, you've taught science and math to high schoolers, and you've been here for a few years managing Michigan Tech's energy portfolio. And you also now help oversee almost all aspects of our facilities and custodial services. So how are you thinking about sustainability and resilience in your work now, and how's that changed over the years?
So for most of my career, my focus has been all about the economics of saving energy and making systems more reliable. You mentioned sustainability as a buzzword that really wasn't in our vocabulary, but we were doing sustainable things. We were saving energy to save dollars, to be more competitive. We were making our systems more reliable so that we weren't breaking things, buying new parts and equipment. Once I've got on Michigan Tech and working with student enterprise groups, working with the Tech Forward initiative, supporting people with their work on campus, then started connecting some dots with, hey, we've been doing this all along, but there's a whole lot more to sustainability. It's not just that little bit of dollars and cents, but it's also, making our connections and community and how we're living, with our community and the environment and how we're impacting them. So it's been a shift. Same story, just kind of a new focus.
That's great, and I'll just say that when I stepped into this position and started to do a couple of early things, I really banged my head on some of the climate stuff and started thinking about energy and came up with a bunch of questions for Larry, and and he was gracious enough to meet with me. And yeah, he had done everything that I was thinking about 2 or 3 years ago. So he's really invested a lot in thinking about energy efficiency and carbon reductions and interesting ways to integrate students. And so it's really great to have an advocate, back there with, he's actually got the dials and the knobs in his hand. So it's been great, and I look forward to continuing that work. So Chelsea, you're a faculty member in the Department of Social Sciences. Your work involves both teaching and research, primarily. So can you highlight some of the ways that you engage in sustainability and resilience through that type of work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alan. So I want to start by saying I'm a sociologist by training. And as a sociologist, I'm a scientist of social groups. So my goal as a researcher is to try to understand patterns in human behavior in groups of people. And in the domain of sustainability, I do that through kind of 2 particular social domains. I'm thinking about social acceptance and social values, what kinds of things drive people to make the decisions that they make, and thinking about policy. So what kinds of rules that humans make and then write into written form can either help to facilitate or can create roadblocks to changes. So that's, as a researcher, those are like the big picture perspectives that I bring to my work. I've done quite a bit of work in energy transitions, thinking about solar technology adoption at the residential scale and the community scale, but also thinking about residential life and consumption more broadly than that. So pretty much anywhere where people are living in a more sustainable way because of the way that the social group is relating to the material things that make their life work. I want to understand how those people came to those decisions and what kinds of rules or policies made it possible, whether that's solar panels or composting toilets or places where you can have tiny homes parked in a parking lot legally. I want to understand how people do that. And in places where people haven't made those kinds of sustainability transitions, I want to understand what are the values, behaviors, kind of social ways that we can shift behavior. One of the things that I've learned as a social scientist is that just providing more information doesn't necessarily help people change their behavior, but trying to understand what groups of people value and then trying to incorporate those values into sustainability transitions is key. As a researcher, I collaborate with folks all across campus in technical domains in the College of Forest Resources and Environmental Sciences. Really, it's one of the things I really value about Michigan Tech is our ability to do interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and convergent work. I'm mostly working with technical experts who recognize that their technical innovations have to be understood in terms of social acceptance and in terms of policy, right? That no matter what amazing widget we can develop, if people aren't willing to use it and if policy doesn't allow it, it's not really going to have the impact that we want it to have. So I end up working with people who recognize that how people think and how people behave is in part dependent on the technologies that they're using. And so if we want people to use different kinds of technologies to change the way that they are impacting the earth, we have to understand how people are thinking and how people are behaving. As a teacher, I teach classes in the social sciences department like energy and society or science, technology and society. That course is a great example of one that students all across campus take, and they get a little bit of exposure to thinking about the social impacts of technological innovation and change, both ecological impacts and social impacts, which I think are both really key to sustainability and resilience. We in the social sciences department have an undergraduate degree program in sustainability, science, and society, which is where a lot of my undergraduate teaching and advising and mentoring happens. And then I work in a master's and PhD program in environmental and energy policy. So those are the graduate students I end up working with. And I also am an advisor, like Alan. We have lots of active student organizations on campus, and I serve as the advisor for the Climate Reality Campus Corps. Kendra, who will be here next week giving the tour of the Sustainability Demonstration House, is the current student org president. So she's an example of somebody who really came to campus wanting to see positive change, and the students' energy and motivation is really, I think, what we see kind of shifting or creating the potential to shift campus culture. So that's a little bit about the work that I do and how I engage with faculty across campus and research.
Yeah, a lot of hats, talking about all the different programs that you contribute to. But I'm going to follow up with one more, because as I mentioned at the outset, you and Larry and I have really been connected through the Tech Forward initiative on sustainability and resilience. And one of the things we're trying to do there is cut across boundaries and be innovative to help push us forward. And this is one of President Kobach's priority areas designed to position us for the future. And so can you give us a better sense, for, wearing that hat, from where Michigan Tech is at with respect to teaching and research on these subjects, and maybe what some of the big challenges and opportunities to really be transformational going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Tech Forward initiatives were started a few years ago now as really opportunities to re-envision Michigan Tech as a leader in the kind of disruptive forces that we see in higher education and technological innovation, and to really think about how we could transform the university, drawing on our strengths, into a leader in sustainability and resilience. And as you've highlighted very well, I think we have a lot of really great research and a lot of great curriculum in these domains already. And we have seen quite a bit of growth in those educational opportunities for students across campus. So I mentioned the undergraduate degree program in social sciences. That's very new. We have several graduate certificates across campus that are focused on sustainability and resilience. In the College of Engineering, there's the Natural Hazards and Risk Reduction, Resilient Water Infrastructure, and Engineering Sustainability and Resilience. We've also seen that growth in the College of Forest Resources and Environmental Science, the CFRES undergraduate and graduate programming. So students are interested in learning about sustainability, and we see a lot of growth across campus. And the Tech Forward initiative is really, I think, there just to make sure we have a read on that growth and to make sure that we're facilitating communication so that when students know they want to learn more, they have one place to go to really see what are the opportunities there. I wanted to also mention some work that one of our climate leaders on campus, Sarah Green, is doing with the YA Network, the Youth Environmental Alliance in Higher Education, where she's now supporting students in their engagement in the annual International Climate Negotiation event, the Conference on the Parties, or the COP. So Sarah Green has worked to get the status to allow Michigan Tech students to go, and now Michigan Tech students are a part of a network across the country with other universities in this National Science Foundation supported network to really grow our access and our visibility in kind of global climate leadership. And I think I highlight that because I think it's a really amazing opportunity that Sarah's brought to campus, but it also highlights what I see as some of the challenges that sustainability and resilience are very, very local issues. We have lots to do on campus to make changes. There's lots of potential, but there are also, issues all the way up to the global scale. And so for an organizational group like the Tech Forward initiative, we spend a lot of time thinking about where should we focus our efforts, given the fact that these challenges are facing us at so many different scales, and there's so many different opportunities to create change. That said, I think one of the things that Michigan Tech does really well is to integrate students into research and to integrate research into positive, actionable change. And so we really have a potential as a university to operate as a living laboratory where research and education and campus changes are coming together in ways that are facilitating educational innovation, creating research opportunities, and creating the change that we need to see within the campus and all the way up to the global scale. So I think we have a lot of opportunity, and I recognize that a part of the challenge is the complexity of these issues.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the living lab idea where, our operational challenges become opportunities for students in their applied work and engagement and education, and also for faculty and their research is one that really speaks to me, and a lot of other campuses are starting to do and put together. I want to just take that idea maybe and take it back to Larry, who, from somebody that comes from a campus operations perspective, your job is to make sure that buildings are heating and everything is working functionally on campus. And that's like a pretty core importance to us. And we talk a lot about silos in higher education, right? Even if it's between faculty members in different departments, but now we're talking about, faculty and students interacting with energy and professionals like yourself. So Chelsea highlighted a few of those ways. So, from your perspective in energy and facilities management, what are some of the ways that you have experienced or you feel like in the future you can interact with students and faculty to really, help you in your core mission and define that shared ground?
I think I mentioned one time to Alan that, I'm swimming in data and sometimes drowning in data. We have a lot of moving parts, especially on the energy front, with energy purchases, energy use, metering and distributing that energy, and then making decisions. So the Green Campus Enterprise, they've been doing our carbon footprint calculation since 2008. So we've got quite a bit of background and quite a bit of data back there. And working with Alan and Rob Handler, we're starting to pull some of that together to help use that data to make decisions, not only report where we've been, but use that to make decisions where we're going. See, one of the Q&A questions was asking, what's going on in the EE department. One thing that's going on is, as a mechanical engineer, I think smart grids, really resilient grids, being able to move power, that's going to be the key getting us through this next transition. So we have researchers that are monitoring what happens with Michigan Tech and how we connect with the rest of the grid. So if I'm running my generators, we see how that affects the grid as I'm opening and closing things, as our load changes. There's a group of students that are building a model, a real-time model of our electrical distribution on campus. All of our 28 buildings that are connected to our Michigan Tech power grid. And that not only would be a nice tool for me in managing that, it's also a nice way to be able to get that information out to all of campus or anyone who's interested to just see, where's this power going right now? How's this building doing? What's changing in that building and its power usage? So there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of moving parts happening out there right now with that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I could keep this going between us, but I see that we're up to 20 questions in the Q&A. And so I think I want to just maybe shift us over in that direction and answer some of those specific questions. But,
I was going to chime in here. And one of the things that this hasn't been, there hasn't been a press release on this yet because we're waiting for the right timing. But we are about to be commissioned as an official regional test center for solar panels. And this is a 34 kilowatt facility, I believe, out at the Keweenaw Research Center, which is out by the airport. And so next time you're flying out of town and using all those carbon, footprints, take a look to the right as you're driving in and you're going to see solar panels being tested. And so we are the northernmost facility for testing solar panels. And they don't have any other facility like that. So that's through Sendia National Labs Department of Energy. And it's an open facility for anyone to test any panels they want. You just got to pay the use fee for doing that. So that's part of what we're doing, is building our research capability in this area.
That's a great example. There's so much going on. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I know half of what's going on yet. So that's going to be a big part of my job, is to just get a better idea of all the great things that are already happening on campus. So that's a great example. Okay, so we spent about 35 minutes there trying to paint a little bit of a picture of what's happening on campus, and hopefully that was useful. And we can dive into some of these more specific questions now. that have popped up. I'll take them in order mostly. I can take this first one. So somebody's asking, John Sawyering is asking if the Brundtland definition of sustainability includes future generations of people in all economic classes. And I can say that, that commission and that definition had a big emphasis on equity. And so I can't speak for the folks in that room, but that's certainly what it's been interpreted as. And to bring it back to Michigan Tech, I think that that we have some great capacity and things going on already, thinking about what some of these energy transitions or sustainability investments will do to impact different groups of people, because there are real equity concerns that that come with this. And so one institution that I'll highlight is a fairly new one. It's another tech forward initiative, and it's the Institute on Policy, Ethics, and Culture here on campus, and it's really looking to connect, frontline researchers in engineering and technological fields with ethicists and others to sort of look at the way that technological change impacts culture and some of those equity issues. And so we're certainly thinking about that here, and there's a lot of work to do on that. So it's a great question. Let's see here. Larry, this might be a question for you. Harry Jones asks, are you actively engaged now with your energy vendors? So electricity, air travel, natural gas, et cetera, to reduce carbon emissions. So what kind of conversations are you having with our big vendors, Larry?
Yeah, so energy wide in the entire industry, carbon is definitely a hot topic. I mentioned in the intro that in our current electrical contracts, as of June of 2017, 50% of the electricity we buy is through wind power. And as we're in negotiations right now with our vendor, renewables is definitely part of the conversation. We're a member of the Wolverine Electric Power Marketing Cooperative. They're a group of 20 some different, there's 5 universities, several large industries, retail and hospitality, so kind of a diverse group. And we're focused on purchasing not only for the economics, but also the sustainability side of it.
All right, and I'm going to jump in here and ask that we answer Cynthia Hodges' question. Alan, as an alum, I would like for us to continue the Michigan Tech Career Fair free store where students can get gently used career clothing. Can you find us a place on campus to do this? So I'm gonna let you answer that, and I'm going to remind you, Alan and folks, that I need to step away at 6:45 in order to join another Zoom webinar that I'm hosting for students. And so, Alan, I'll leave it up to you to kind of wrap it up at 7. And that's when we stop recording. And if you want to continue to take questions after that, you're free to do so, but do a wrap up at 7, please. So answer Cynthia's question. Where are we going to have our career fair store?
Thanks for the handoff. Yeah. You know what? It's unbelievable how hard it is to find space on campus. So as some of you know, storage space is at a premium. So I can't answer the where, but what I can say is that I think we could benefit from, talking about that program as having multiple benefits. It's clearly a great benefit to students that have a financial need to be able to be prepared for that moment in their life. But it's also a way for us to encourage reuse and to reduce purchasing and waste. And so can we fold that into other programs that are here existing and that maybe they will develop in the future to just, I guess, highlight the importance of it on multiple levels. And so as a director of sustainability and resilience, I would like to at least be involved in the conversations on that level, right? So we already have a Husky exchange program, for example, that gathers unwanted but usable materials from students as they move out of the residence halls in the spring. A lot of that material is food. It gets given away to food pantries, whether that's on campus or in the community. But then a lot of it we store over the summer and give back to students in the fall as they move in. Some of the stuff we sell at a very small fraction of what it's worth. And we're starting to keep that money to keep sustainability initiatives alive and potentially create a student green fund so they can do more projects. And so maybe to roll a project like the career fair into that as a suite of, another activity that we can do to sort of keep reuse of material and divert waste would be a great way to think about it. And how can we maybe find a space that serves multiple programs at the same time is just a way to increase the importance of it. So that's a thought that I have. I haven't identified that space. Janet, do you have a space?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in response to that as well. So that I think that highlights really well some of the challenges of coordination on campus, right? That finding a centralized place where we could host kind of permanently that kind of career fair free clothing store is a challenge because we lack coordination that says sustainability and resilience are clear top priorities. They're in our action plan. Let's make a physical space for them on campus. However, the flip side of that is that many units on campus do this kind of piecemeal, right? So like the social sciences department, we have our own winter free clothing store that's just accessible to students who move here and don't have access to winter gear. So it's organized department by department or unit by unit in some cases. It's also something that our students have taken the lead on because now the student organization Students for Sustainability is organizing free clothing swaps pretty regularly on campus that aren't necessarily meant for career fair clothing, but are just meant to highlight that free clothes and not purchasing brand new clothes all the time can be a way to reduce your carbon footprint and your water footprint as well. So that example is a really great one in highlighting some of those coordination challenges and that we see students stepping in to take the lead sometimes when they see an opportunity.
Great point. And those are just two examples of other programs because our residential education and housing services group also has a winter warm up rack that they put out for students in that transition to cold weather. And again, collect stuff. We had almost 100 items that we were able to put towards that in the spring when students were moving out. And so, yeah, it's all around. So some coordination would maybe go a long way. So Chelsea, I don't, maybe it's not fair, but I'm going to hand this one to you. So it seems like all education efforts today are aimed at the reduction of carbon footprint. It sounds to me like we're putting all of our eggs in one basket.
Yeah, so I think the reality is that climatic change is the global environmental and social challenge that will face the students who are graduating today. As adults, they're going to be dealing with the changing climate, and that is related to carbon. I think another part of it is that carbon is something that we can translate lots of environmental impacts into their carbon footprint. So, we can think about the carbon needed to access clean and fresh water. We can think about the carbon embedded in our food. And so carbon ends up being a kind of shared metric that we can use to talk across these domains of impact when we could flip that conversation or that dialogue and say, okay, what do humans need to live quality lives? And how can we do that with the least amount of negative impact on the environment or other people? And that we could have the same conversation about our impacts without translating it into carbon, but carbon is something that crosses domains pretty easily. We can quantify it, we can measure it, we can kind of flatten differences across food and electricity and water and natural gas by thinking about carbon. So I think a part of it is just it's a quantifiable, measurable tool that we can use. And we know that climatic change is going to be the issue facing college students today. But is it the only impact we need to be thinking about? Definitely not. And does it maybe kind of obscure some of the other impacts that we should also be thinking about. Certainly water quality and quantity are clear issues as well. Thinking about the equity side of sustainability and social sustainability in terms of equity, justice, perceptions, and realities associated with fairness, those things all matter too. And so yes, carbon is a useful tool because it's translatable across domains, but it is not the only impact that matters when it comes to sustainability and resilience.
That's great. Here's another really insightful, great question from Rachel Stark. What do you suggest we discuss with our own workplaces to help encourage sustainable practices? So, the first place where my mind goes is that every institution, every company has a mission. You have core values. Can you start to tie sustainability to those and start to talk about them and match them up with that? Working through sustainability and resilience issues here at Michigan Tech, I see there's so many places to attach it to our strategic priorities, and so that's a great way to start it. And then I think to find ways to find like-minded folks and allies and start to make a little plan. What can you do that is maybe easy? That's an easy yes, and start to get some easy wins. And then where do you go from there? Larry, do you have anything to add to this? You've worked at a bunch of different places. I mean, everywhere from school district to a mine to Michigan Tech. How do you start to incorporate some of that change in your work?
Yeah, so following right along with what you just mentioned, Ellen, what are the easy wins? What are the things that we can start to celebrate, to demonstrate? And start with, what do we do and what can we do? Is it just start doing a little bit of recycling and then demonstrate the value of that? Or is it looking at our energy use in our office, in our room? A lot of resources out there. EPA, Energy Star, they actually have tools that you can use in your own office space, workplace, to kind of find some of these opportunities. But just start with the small pieces, and don't forget to look at, these are some good things we've done, and here's a path we can go.
I think one of the great things, at least in my mind, in talking about sustainability and resilience, is that for organizations that are thinking about economics, it is the economically wise thing to do, to be incorporating sustainability and resilience into planning and decision making. So I think in that way, there's a logical kind of sell for organizations that are motivated by their economics in some way or another. The thing that comes to mind for me, as a sociologist, is thinking about what are the habits in the workplace, what are people doing, how are people using space, how are people using the things in the workplace, and how might we change those habits in easy ways to have impacts on environmental sustainability, economic kind of performance, any of those things that we could quantify as sustainability and resilient related activities. It's a lot easier to get people to recycle if the recycling bins are clearly marked and easy to find, right? It's a lot easier to reduce plastic waste if you have non-plastic options available. So just thinking about the habits in any institution and how you can easily restructure those habits. I think if you're asking people to change their behavior in really dramatic ways, that's a lot harder than just, can we change these habits through some pretty easy insertions? And starting with, what are our habits in this space, to me is a good place to start to think through those issues.
There's so many good questions here with so many different flavors. So I'm going to kind of just transition to something that's of a different ilk, from James Turba. Does Tech currently have cogeneration at the heating plant? And the short answer there is no. Larry, do you want to talk about, what the trade-offs are of, thinking about going that route and investing in cogen? What are the benefits to that? And what are some alternative paths as we're, confronting growth and aspirations to reduce our carbon footprint?
Okay. So cogeneration is definitely an opportunity to take an incremental step down in our overall, carbon footprint, our overall energy footprint. It's a significant capital cost and operational cost. And, one of the big advantages, it brings that generation right on site and you lose all of the inefficiencies of the distribution, on the grid, getting it all the way from the generators to the users. But some of the trade-offs are, your local fossil fuel burn increases to offset that generation somewhere else. If there's a lot of renewables available in your market, maybe your overall net impact on the region would be increasing the overall fossil fuel burn, the overall carbon impact. And times and technology are changing fast. Microgrids, smaller generation, heat pump technology. So they're all, new technologies coming out as fast as we can evaluate them. So we will probably have cogeneration on campus, just my gut feeling, but we may also skip right over that step and move on to a different technology as things come out.
Right. So there's lots of trade-offs, and I spent almost a full week at a conference earlier this month, and one of the presentations that I watched was from University of Massachusetts Amherst, and they had invested millions of dollars. I think it was 30 or 40 million dollars in a state-of-the-art cogen facility about 12 years ago in 2009, and they're developing a plan forward towards carbon neutrality, and the plan almost has to involve decommissioning that heating plant as soon as their debt obligations are over, so that they can move to renewable energy sources. And the cost figures of that is just staggering. So, I think there's going to be different trade-offs and choices as we start to confront some of those things. And it's interesting that, 20 years ago, cogen would have been very obvious as an upgrade. And now you start to look at, trade-offs and are there different routes with emerging technologies. So it'll be really fascinating to start to answer those questions. And I just think that's one example of an area where students can work with Larry and maybe, some contract engineers to start to measure what some of those different paths can look like and what the trade-offs are. And, why not be a part of that conversation at the campus level? It's just a lot of questions we have to answer.
Yeah. So 20 years ago, the answer was no on straight up economics. So we were looking at straight up dollars and cents, and it just didn't pay. As we've kind of broadened, our decision matrix, thinking about other, other pieces of the sustainability puzzle, that may have changed that decision. And now timing might say, just like you said, people are starting to look to decommission relatively new plants because times are changing.
Well, let's maybe this is going to be the last question that we get in for 7. And Chelsea, I want to direct this to you first, from Tom Promoda. I was at my Superior Lakeshore property recently and noticed no windmill signs around town. I was wondering, from a social science perspective, why are people against windmills?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I saw that question. The reality is people are supportive of the energy systems that they see, whether those energy systems are pipelines or solar panels, right? So if you survey people about what kinds of systems they support, they're most likely to support the ones they already see in some way or another. Anything new, people react to it based on kind of framing or what they think or what their neighbors say or what they hear, but they don't have direct experience with it. And the reality is people are supportive of the energy technologies that they see, regardless of what energy technology that is. In this context, I think some of the issues around windmills have to do with ownership. In our research on solar panels and perceptions associated with solar siting, a lot of times developers or policy experts assume that people don't want to see the solar panels, right? And it turns out that in some contexts, being able to see them actually increases support support for them if they're in the right places, right? If they're on land mills or if they're on brownfield sites, if they're in places where you aren't cutting down trees anyway. But the thing that people are concerned about is the distribution of the economic benefits. So when you live in a community like ours, where the largest investor-owned utility is not a locally rooted company, and your presumptions about energy system development are concerns that it's not going to have local economic benefits, I think that's where some of that concern comes from. There are certainly people who say, I don't want to see them, I like the aesthetic I already have, but the reality is those aesthetics are going to change, right? As we see energy transitions shift, what kinds of energy we're using, what kind of energy technology, and people are supportive of the energy systems that they see, regardless of what that is. So as we see more of them, that shift will likely happen, that people will change their concerns. But the biggest concern that people have when we ask them is about the distribution of economic benefits. It's not necessarily about whether or not they can see the system or not that's new. It's that they wonder who's benefiting and who isn't. And until that's clearly explained by the developers and by the companies that are interested, I think it's really hard to shift that skepticism. That's my social science perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And I did notice following this in the papers, kind of coming down the line in those last couple of weeks before there was, I guess, a consolidation of, shall we say, some resistance there. There were also some very unfavorable environmental reports that came out about impact on birds and on bats, which are already very much suffering at a low population level due to the white nose syndrome. And so it's kind of sometimes brings in these, I don't know if it's strange bedfellows or what the right way to say it is, but interests that maybe typically would be at odds that kind of come together and are enough to stop the momentum. So it's interesting to see it all unfold. I want to finish just real quick with one question from somebody who I recognize as a student that I've worked with in the past, and I think it's a great question from Gary Trott. Regarding campus goals, outside of academics and research, what initiatives do you envision for student culture? Especially in our techie culture with increased usage of smart appliances, increased computing needs, etc., along with dining and commuting, where a large group of students all creating small impacts create a large overall impact. That's a great question. And I have two sort of starting points to that conversation. The first is that we have an opportunity to engage students right from when they get here. So whether that's through our orientation programs and more extensively than in the residence halls, and being able to connect people with sustainability and resilience as an important part of what we're doing here at Michigan Tech, and to help them, have maybe specific ideas on how to lessen their own individual impacts is part of the story. And the second is that, individual actions there's some limit to what changing individual actions can do to really move the needle on this. And so as a university, are we going to be committed to, cleaner power technologies or more efficient systems that allow students to do what they need to do to thrive here, and that might be using computers, or, that might be commuting from where they are. Can we set up infrastructure so that it's easier for them to walk or bike, or incentives that pay them to not bring a car that they drive to campus every day, things like that, to just make those choices, make the calculations a little bit different and to raise that awareness. So any other thoughts on that, Larry or Chelsea? We should probably shut it down. Janet said, I have to shut it down at 7. It's already 7:01.
Yeah, I guess my thought in reaction to that is that, the students who are arriving on Michigan Tech's campus today are aware that climatic change is going to be a concern in their lifetime. And so in that way, they're already attuned to these issues to some extent, I think, by and large. The thing that I try to get students to think about, which is a little bit different than most of our conversation, is about how to share access to systems, because sharing resources is really one of the biggest ways we can reduce our individual impact. And students already share things, whether it's access to computer labs or Netflix passwords or whatever it might be. So if we can get them talking about how they can share, whether that's car sharing or lawnmower sharing or whatever it might be, that can help to shift that culture so that they carry those lessons with them into the future. So that for me is one of the big things.